Hello, everybody. My name is Conor McGilligan. This is my channel. Welcome back. We're talking all things football today. We're going to be speaking about Sunderland's recruitment drive, which at this moment, I think is becoming a source of conversation for every Premier League fan, not just Leeds and Burnley fans, but Brighton fans are giving the take. You're even having Man United fans and Chelsea fans having the take because you're having a few clubs question whether or not they're going down the Nottingham Forest route in terms of just bringing players in. I think there's a little bit more nuance and context to be added to that. But before we get in the video, everybody, do us a favor, slap a like, comment, and subscribe as always. And let's get into it. So Sunderland look like they're about to sign Simon Adingra from Brighton, which I think is a really decent signing for Sunderland. I think when you look at it on the surface of it, people might say something like he's in the last year of his contract. Sunderland are looking for a bid 20 million quid and upwards. Brighton have made triple the money back on Simon Adingra, but I think there's a lot more context. I think for a newly promoted side, he's absolutely perfect. I think he fits into the mold. He's got a good balance on both sides. I think he's quick, which every promoted side needs and scares a lot of defenders in the Premier League. He's naturally going to make any right back in the Premier League coming up against Simon Adingra rethink their positioning 100% because of the pace and that transitional usage they can get out of him if they go long to Adingra and they just pin him on that halfway line when they may be sitting into a little bit of a low block, which I think a lot of the teams will do now. That will be facilitated in a low block by Noah Siddiqui and Habib Diarra as well, who I think there's been a lot of conversation as well that Sunderland haven't sort of trained their defence and really aided that. I think the signings of Siddiqui and I think the signings of Habib Diarra naturally enhance that defensive profile as well because you've got two shielders. You've got two players there who can effectively play in that 8 position as well. They can go box to box, but their primary focus is going to be on a double pivot. It's going to be on duels. It's going to be on making sure that they're shielding that back four. So I think they have added to the defense a little bit there. But the fee is said to be around about 24 million for Adingra when it comes to add-ons as well. Now, as I've said, the fee I think is slightly high. That's what I would say because there's not been much minutes from him. And I think he really flourished probably at the height of his Brighton career, if you want to put it that way, under De Zerbi. Matoma has stopped him really developing when it comes to, obviously, the front line of Brighton, and that is understandably so. Matoma is an outrageous footballer who probably could fit into many teams in world football. But I think there's something that Sunderland fans can take out of this as well when it comes to Adingra. Brighton brought him in. And when you're bringing in a Brighton player as well, of which Sunderland have brought very good relations towards as well with the selling of Tom Watson. I think when Brighton sign a player, normally their recruitment and their scouting department is absolutely nailed on. They normally get it right. That's not to say they get every single thing right, but 90% of the time they get it right. And Adingra, there's bags full of potential there. Like Talby, who they've just brought in as well. There is context though. They are raw. They are young. Both can play. Obviously, you've got Adingra on the left. You've got Talby on the right. We all know that. But you're looking at Talby. He's played European football, hasn't he, for Club Bruges. You look at someone like Simon Adingra as well. He's been spoken of in the past 2 or 3 seasons as one of these raw prospects, and there was murmurings of Chelsea being interested last season, Man United been interested last season, so that's got to give you a crumb of comfort if you're a Sunderland fan. Now, some Brighton fans will tell you that his defensive output wasn't great. I actually think when you'd watch Adingra, I thought off the ball he was good, he was willing, he had energy, he had endeavour, he was good when it comes to the pursual and recovery pace. What if a player had got past him? I think his defensive work was pretty decent, to be honest with you. I think he's hard working off the ball as well. I just don't think he fit into the Brighton way of playing, like I said, outside of De Zerbi. When you're behind Matoma, it's always going to be difficult for you to get minutes, get exposure, gain that continuity and momentum that he's probably going to get at Sunderland. Now, a big bit of conversation for Sunderland fans in the general football world right now with Sunderland making all of these signings. When you're looking at Talby, when you're looking at Adingra, when you're looking at Habib Diarra, when you're looking at Reinildo, when you're also looking at Noah Siddiqui, who represents Congo, a lot of these players, well, every single one of these players is going to be representing their country at AFCON, which throws up a hell of a lot of conversation when it comes to Sunderland and obviously the outside world, because these are big profile players coming in. And obviously with Sunderland being able to sell Tommy Watson and Jude Bellingham, they've brought in circa around 45, 50 million quid, which looks excellent on the books. But when you're bringing in all these players, you look at the fixture list, they could potentially miss Brighton and Hove Albion away, Leeds United at home, which is a big game for them, Manchester City at home, Spurs away, and Brentford away as well, and potentially Crystal Palace at home. But there's games in there where Sunderland fans you've seen online say, well, it's a bit of a free hit. But when you kind of look at Leeds United and they're potentially Brighton away if they are to miss that, and obviously with the after effect of coming home and that rest period, potentially Palace at home, and would Sunderland target Brentford away as well? You know, you take Manchester City, and Spurs out of that period, there are winnable games there for Sunderland. So that might be a bit of a risk that they're willing to take. Something else of which I think why Sunderland are doing this as well, and I think it is smart again, but it could be a little bit of a risk, is because Sunderland might think, well, we're going down, like a lot of the bottom three are being, odds on going down anyway. So we might as well bring in these players, these young players, when you're looking at Adingra, Talbi, Habib, Diarra, Noah Siddiqui, etc. Reinildo isn't obviously of that. I think he's around about 31. But when you look at these four players in particular coming in, they might think to themselves, do you know what? If they're able to go out, showcase their talent, showcase their value. We know Habib Diarra has mentioned before that he wants to play in Europe. Noah Siddiqui has apparently got big ambitions as well. Obviously, they'll want to stay with Sunderland, but at the same time, a lot of these players, when you're looking at Talbi, when you're looking at Noah Siddiqui, played in Europe already, they might be thinking to themselves, as Sunderland, we may be able to get some really good value for these players if we go down. And not only can they showcase themselves in the Premier League, but more importantly, in some sort of dominant sides as well, who they'll be representing in AFCON, where they might have more of the ball, they might be able to really showcase themselves at AFCON, therefore making Sunderland more money back in the long run if they were to go down, which you might see is quite smart, to be honest with you. Well, others may argue that if you are to miss 3-4 games of a 38-game season, that is an acceptable trade-off for the caliber of player that you're getting, which also makes sense. But if there are games in and around that period of which we've just spoken about, when it comes to Leeds potentially, when it comes to Brentford and others, Crystal Palace, if there is a bit of a hangover and players are needing to rest a little bit, if you are looking at these games, you might be thinking to yourself, in this period, these are big games of which Sunderland can get some points in, and especially with Leeds United at home, you're expecting Sunderland to be targeting that for 3 points. Let's be honest, can you really target games in the Premier League with the sheer competitiveness of the division and how hard it is across all fronts? Sunderland will be targeting Leeds and Burnley. But outside of that, with a lot of the Premier League clubs, really, there's not really that many teams, if you're to target outside the top six, who, you're looking at and thinking they're easy fixtures, they're easy fixtures, they're easy fixtures. You look at the type of sort of players that potentially West Ham are going to be able to target after they bring in the money from Tottenham for Mohamed Kudus, which is going to be beyond 60 million quid. You look at Wolves with the signing of Fer Lopez and others that are apparently coming in, and the new formed double pivot of Gomez and Andre, which was formed at the back end of last season. They're not that many weak teams in the Premier League, so it's going to be interesting to see Sunderland's sort of approach to this, and if they are maybe looking at AFCON and thinking, well, during that period we can just, a lot of those games are free hits anyway. But I look at them and I only think City and I only think Spurs are potentially the free hits there, really. But when you look at the teams last season that went to Tottenham in particular away from home, there was a lot of success there. But for me, once again, Sunderland's new signing, if they are to bring in Simon Adingra, is a gamble of which is worth taking. It's a Premier League talent, absolutely ready to start immediately. But AFCON absentees will be disrupted. 100% will be disruptive to the squad. Of course it will. And how much will the rotations of potentially Chris Rigg and Dan Neil, how much exposure will they have had in a 4-2-3-1 system in the Premier League for them to be rotated during that period? If, let's say, Siddiqui and Habib Diarra have been playing week in, week out, that is a massive risk in the Premier League. But potentially Sunderland, as I've mentioned before, see it as a risk worth taking. But alongside that, there could be disruption afterwards. There may be injuries to Diarra. There may be injuries to Talbi, to Adingra. You just don't know. So it is a substantial risk with Sunderland. However, let's be brutally honest with Sunderland's recruitment team. It's been absolutely fantastic. It's been outrageous over the years, and they've got to this point because of their recruitment team. So they'll know what they're doing. KLD and everybody at the top of Sunderland definitely have a plan. They definitely have a strategy here. Now, I think this is a really good signing with Adingra. I think Talbi's a good signing. I think Diarra and Siddiqui are good signings for Sunderland. They are level raisers, 100%, and that is exactly what Sunderland want. And if we just have a quick look here at their, let's say hypothetically they do bring Petrovic in, this Sunderland side all of a sudden is looking very, very decent. And you do feel that there's going to be an alternative, whether or not it's Lucas Perry at Lyon to maybe a Petrovic. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But Hume, Dan Ballard, Luke O'Nine, I feel that needs to be improved on at the back. I think Sunderland have worked forward backwards instead of back to front. And I think in that defence, even if you've got Reinaldo in there, it's going to be interesting to see him and Sirkin. I think that's a good double partnership there. We're just including all of their new signings in here. But that three I do think needs looking at, or at least competition for Hume. But definitely Ballard and Nine, I think there needs to be some competition there. Diarra and Siddiqui, I think, have got relevant or relatively good competition when it comes to Rigg and Dan Neil. I think when you go a little bit further forward as well, Talbi, Lafay, Adingra. You've then got in there, you know, the likes of potentially Patrick Roberts off the bench. You've then also got, you know, the likes of Mienda as well. And going forward, you've also got Isidore. So it's working in the right way for Sunderland. They've got to really bulk up that back line as well. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. Is Sunderland going about this in the right way, everybody? Really fascinated to hear your thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in a bit.